Just now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has left for Moscow. He will be attending the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. He is also scheduled to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And visuals on your screens right now are of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has just departed for Moscow. He will be in Moscow for 2 days from July 8th to 9th. This is also Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Russia since its invasion of Ukraine, an issue on which New Delhi has maintained a neutral stance. And that is Prime Minister Narendra Modi departing for Moscow to attend the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit. The Kremlin says that Prime Minister Modi's visit, the 2-day visit in Russia, will be extensive. Now, the 2-day summit is aimed at reviewing bilateral ties between the two countries, including in key areas like defense, investment, energy cooperation, education and culture. As per the Kremlin, the leaders will partake in both restricted talks as well as the ones involving delegations. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said that trade ties will be at the top of the agenda. This comes as India's import of discounted Russian crude has increased majorly. That is since the war in Ukraine. Jaishankar also pointed out towards, and I'm quoting here, trade imbalance between the two countries. While Moscow's total exports to India are $65 billion, India's exports are only about $4 billion. India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra has revealed that New Delhi is looking to expand exports across various sectors, including farm products, technology, pharmaceuticals and services. As per India's Foreign Ministry, Prime Minister Modi will reach Moscow late today in the afternoon, and he has just departed from Moscow a short while ago, following which the Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold a private dinner for the Indian leader, where they are expected to discuss regional and global issues of mutual interest. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Modi will have an in-person interaction with the Indian diaspora in Russia. Later in the day, he will also lay wreath at the tomb of unknown soldier, a war memorial for unidentified Soviet soldiers from World War I. He will then visit Russia's state-owned nuclear energy facility, Rosatom, followed by a restricted meeting with the Russian president. Although India and Russia have held annual summits since 2000, none have taken place since the Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to New Delhi in 2021. Prime Minister Modi will also talk about the Indians who were, and I'm quoting here, misled into joining the Russian army in its war against Ukraine. The Prime Minister is also expected to demand an earliest discharge of these people from the Russian military. Till now, at least 4 Indians have been killed amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. At least 10 Indians have been rescued, while over 20 others have contacted the Indian mission in Moscow to seek their release. Earlier in May, Indian police arrested 4 Russian nationals involved in enticing Indian people to Russia over lucrative job offers. Meanwhile, the Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov has said that the West is, and I'm quoting, closely and jealously watching the visit, adding that the visit of Russia-India ties are at the level of strategic partnership. And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, is joining us live from Moscow. Hi, Siddhant. Prime Minister Modi has just left for Moscow a short while ago, his first visit in 5 years. How are the preparations looking like in Moscow? Joining us live from there. And also talk to us about the key events lined up for the Indian Prime Minister.
Well, Moscow is all set to welcome the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's after a gap of almost 9 years that the Prime Minister is travelling to Moscow. Of course, 5 years since he travelled to Russia. But essentially, we know that focus today remains on his private dinner with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also, we know that tomorrow will be the big day when the 22nd India-Russia Summit takes place. in Kremlin. But before that, he will be addressing the members of the diaspora, laying the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier as well, and visiting a pavilion as well. We will see all those visuals. But as the Prime Minister left New Delhi a short while ago, before that, he issued a departure statement in which he mentioned about the strong Indo-Russia relationship, but also strong India-Austria relationship. He travels to Austria after the Moscow leg of visit. But interestingly, when it comes to Russia, he mentioned that India can play a peaceful and a role of a stabilizing force when it comes to the regional issues. That, of course, no doubt means the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. And this is something that the Indian Prime Minister has mentioned in the past as well, when he last met in person meeting with the Russian president in Samarkand, when he said that this is not an era of war, a line that was also part of the G20 joint statement that year.
Right, Siddhant. Before departing for Moscow, Prime Minister Modi also said, looking forward to review ties with my friend Putin. Are there any breakthrough agreements in the pipeline? Talk to us more about that, and also about how this historic visit by the Indian Prime Minister demonstrates long-term cooperation between New Delhi and Moscow at a time when West has completely isolated Russia.
Well, essentially, 2 or 3 big announcements are expected. One of them is opening of new Indian consulates in Russia. Currently, India has 3 diplomatic missions. That means the Indian embassy here in Moscow and the 2 consulates in one in St. Petersburg, another in Vladivostok. That's Russian Far East. Now, essentially, an issue that is going to dominate from the Indian side is first, of course, is the trade deficit. That remains a concern for New Delhi, because remember, India has increased its import of Russian crude oil, but the Indian exports to Russia hasn't increased, and that leads to a trade deficit that is a challenge for New Delhi. The second, of course, is the Indians in the Russian army, and India is hoping that all the Indians will be released very soon, and this is something that the Indian side has been raising with Russia. In fact, just last week in Astana, on the sidelines of the SCO summit, when the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met, this is something that India had strongly raised. Now, essentially, you pointed out to the relationship between India and Russia at a time when, of course, the West has been trying to isolate Russia. Russia sees India as a key partner and a key ally. In fact, Russia has been increasing its engagement with the Asian countries, particularly with India, with which it has a glorious past, whether it is the Soviet support in 1971 or the annual India-Russia summit in the first 2 decades of this century.
Right, so now, of course, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow does mark a milestone in growing New Delhi-Moscow ties. We'll, of course, be tracking the summit very closely with you, but thanks very much for joining us on the show.